Hello, folks. It's George Leoniak, and welcome to New Geometry. I'm excited to be back with another video for you. And today we're going to get into the Rhombic Enneacontahedron, the 90-sided polyhedron. And it's got diamond-shaped faces of two varieties, a narrow one and a wide one. There's 30 of these and 60 of these. So we're going to discover how this is related and connected to all the other forms that I share on here, particularly the rhombic tricontahedron. Now, when I'm saying rhombic, that just means diamond face, right? So this has got 30, this has got 90. So I've set up a presentation for you to really dive deep into this form, which was quite a mystery for me for some time and still is. But let's jump into the screen share. And I've got plenty of forms here around me that are going to help to bring more information and insight around this incredible form. So let's see here. Let me just do that one more time. I don't think I shared the right screen. I just want to double check. Share screen. Okay, I think we're clear now. I just want to make sure. Okay, great. So my first introduction to the rhombic enneacontahedron was with this little guide here. I bought some Zoom tools on eBay. I mean, luckily it came with this little thin Zoom primer, and I thought it was about Zoom tools, but it was about making geodesic structures. And in it, I was flipping through the first pages, and all of a sudden, I was like, okay, I'm familiar with the cube, octahedron, tetrahedron, rhombic dodecahedron, the classic stuff, the rhombic tricontahedron. I was all good. And then all of a sudden, boom, what's this? Rhombic enneacontahedron. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's just too much for right now. I put it aside. I didn't even want to contemplate or think about it because I had no idea how I'm going to get 90 faces and draw that in the sacred geometry. I was just getting the tricontahedron and all those down. Well, about a year later, because that was probably a year ago or so, I had this incredible dream maybe about 2 weeks ago where the whole form of the enneacontahedron was taken apart before my eyes. I could see like the internal structure of it and all these things. That morning I woke up and I drew this pretty much right away. But the issue is that I needed to find a version that I was able to draw it from an orthogonal perspective to see how it fit into the orthographic perspective, so I could see how it fit into the golden circle templates that I'm working with. And I searched all over online, the Wikipedia sites, like I often do, to get some comparisons. And this form has very, very little information on it. In fact, anybody who knows how to update Wikipedia with information, there's quite a lot in this presentation that could be added to that, especially these line drawings, like take the circles out, whatever. So I'll just put that out there. So anyway, there's a great site, a guide to visual polyhedra. This is the website at the bottom. I use it a lot, especially if there's a form out there that doesn't have any line drawings. You could rotate the form around 3D, and then I just take a screenshot of it, and you're able to take away the perspective, visual perspective, and put it into the flat orthographic projection. So I was able to figure out where all the 5 proportions are in this and draw this one up. So my drawing is directly over top of the one from the visual polyhedra site here. So let's see if I could get that out of the way. We could take a look at the line drawing. Okay, so there's that one. Here was the line drawing. You could see it was right on top of there. And I was just thrilled because there was no drawing method to follow on this one. And, I posted this one later that day over on Facebook and New Geometers. And thankfully, there's some fantastic geometers out there that are joining this, some with some real great mathematical background, as well as just people who are very much into the creative arts. So that's the New Geometers Facebook group. Check that out. Join up for that if you like to see some amazing designs, not only from what I'm presenting, from many other collaborators on there. But thanks to Dan He said that you could build this. He sent me a picture. This is my own construction here, but it was easy to construct out his own tools. I just never knew it. So later that day, I constructed this, and that was really the window in to start to lead to a lot more other questions. So here it is out of the Zoom construction. But before I get to the inner structure and everything like that, my next step was to draw it from the three main perspectives. This was the second perspective that I drew it from, which was the hexagonal view, which uses that golden circle seed of life. If you're new to my videos, the golden circle's seed of life is basically the seed of life pattern, which is the 6 circles around one. And then I'm putting golden ratio circles that are in 5 proportion to one another within that template. And this one I had to extend the circles out just a little bit to pick up some of these other lines. So once again, I was able to layer this over, move these out of the way. That's this one from the site that I took a snapshot of. We'll get that over there. And this is the line drawing. So my apprentices and I are going to draw this one next week. We did another perspective the previous week. But really, it's a new sacred geometry. This is like, I feel like in some ways, you kind of bring this to the sacred geometry template that wasn't really possible with the flower of life, wasn't possible at all with the flower of life design without the golden ratio circles. So as I've said in so many of my videos, adding these golden ratio circles are the doorway into a whole world of polyhedra that are out there that are going to inform how all these structures, these universal building blocks of creation, how they nest together, how they relate to one another. And it really didn't dawn on me or start to open up at all until I started adding these golden ratio circles. So this is the same form from, now I'm adding the back lines. They're not shaded or dotted or anything like that to make them look, so you can see the front and the back as a solid, but I just put them over top because there's some cool patterns that could come out when you see the front and back form like that. So after building the form, one of my favorite shapes, and another one that has really been expansive for me, is the golden hexagon. I've got a few videos just about the golden hexagon, how it's in the dodecahedron, how it creates the golden cube octahedron shape, how you make these truncated octahedron shapes with the golden hexagon, how you make truncated icosahedron with the golden hexagon shape. I mean, it's endless, you know, truncated tetrahedrons over here. I mean, the golden hexagon is awesome. So if you're into sacred geometry, the golden hexagon came about because of my interest in the golden circle seed of life. It's just prominently in there because now it's finally drawing the dodecahedron correctly, and the dodecahedron is essentially made up of golden hexagon shapes with inside of it. I've got a whole video on that, like I just said a moment ago. But anyway, I built the form, right? Here's the Rhombic Enneacontahedron, and one of the exciting things was I didn't quite realize it, but because I built the form, I could see that the golden hexagon was right there built into the form. And now here's my line drawing. The black diamonds are the Rhombic Enneacontahedron. I'll just call it the Enneacontahedron. So the Enneacontahedron is here. That's the 90 sides, right? And then these blue, just like we do a compound to make this Rhombic Triacontahedron of the dodecahedron and icosahedron, drawing a line vertically and then horizontally. Well, I decided to do the same thing on all these rhombic faces. And when you do that, connect the dots, there is that form or that polygon shape of the golden hexagon. Now that is meaning that this edge is in 5 proportion to that edge, and then it has pentagon faces. And I'm going to be showing you all this in the next slide here. So I realized after doing that, because there are 2 forms in there. So here I've removed the Enneacontahedron, and I just showed where the crossings are between the blue and the red. And this form over here, the red one, it's a version of what's called the Pentagon dodecahedron. So the dodecahedron, of course, is 12-sided platonic solid. Well, there's different varieties of this based on when it's pentachus, it's, it's got a raised vertice here, and then you're just connecting those lines over to it. Well, this is, it doesn't add up to the Pentachus dodecahedron that's on the Wikipedia site. That's because it's built off of this version of the truncated icosahedron with golden hexagon faces. We're going to talk all about the regular hexagon version of the truncated icosahedron in just a few slides. But when we start working with the golden hexagon, which has got very little information on it, and I'm so surprised that it's not discussed more, because in all my studies of working and building the polyhedra, this golden hexagon shows up over and over again. And when I do see it referenced in like a Wikipedia site, this is called non-uniform icosahedron, basically, or non-uniform truncation. And when I realized that that's what they were calling it, is just non-uniform, really what it should be called is a golden hexagon face truncated icosahedron, because that then maintains its relationship to the golden hexagon, or to the golden proportion, which is then infused into the mindset of the mathematicians and geometers who are working with this form. If it's just called non-uniform, it just makes it seem like it's disequilibrious. It's just, why is this here really? It's just non-uniform, it doesn't fit in. But it is totally, like I say in my other videos, perfect disequilibrium. And I'm going to show you some cool slides in a moment that describe that more. But let's just talk about the two forms here. We've got the blue and the red crossing, and I've decided to take that blue golden hexagon. Let's just look at the middle one. And I'm showing the phi proportion different edge length here between the blue and the red. And I've turned those into these squares over here. So this red length is the Pentachus dodecahedron edge. That's this one here. And that is in phi proportion to the blue edge, which is this one here, which is now a whole new form, right? That's the truncated icosahedron right here, the golden hexagon faced one. That's that edge right there. And then this yellow, orangish gold one here is this section right here. So this is a compound of these two forms, which then create all the vertices needed to create this form. So you could see this is, I'll put it just like we've got there. There's the narrow edge of the golden hexagon. There's the long edge. There's the narrow, long, narrow, long. It's right in there. And then the other edge is going to be going this way across the length of that diamond face. And that's going to be part of that Pentachus dodecahedron. The cool thing is the compound of both of those forms individually, and here they both are, they are in phi proportion to one another, the edge lengths, 1, 2, 3, the as above, so below, scale invariant phi ratios between the edge lengths of those two forms, which construct these models. So here they all are. I built them all. And I'm showing you pictures from the 3 of the different views. And when I say square view here, it's because it's the technique in drawing tends to draw squares. Pentagon view draws the drawing technique that I work with, does pentagons and decagons. And this is the golden circle seed of life, which I call hexagon view a lot because it primarily draws hexagons. So these are what they line up to look like when they're from that view. See, this is more of a hexagon shape. There's your pentagon. And this edge length right here is the square view version here, these two going across like that. So this was really exciting to me because now all of a sudden I took this form and I started to understand it a little bit more by discovering some of the surface geometry and discovering these two forms and making that link to the golden hexagon. Now, I'm just going to take a little detour here for a second, and talk about the other golden hexagon face truncated icosahedron, which I showed many videos ago. In fact, I discovered this form and built this last fall, and it was the first golden hexagon form that I built, just not knowing really what it was related to or what it was at all. I just saw that I could put the golden hexagons and it would make a small pentagon. Now, this is a smaller form, but it creates larger pentagons because I'm using the different edge of the golden hexagon here that will be lining up with the large pentagon, whereas this one for the golden hexagon uses the short edge of the golden hexagon to make the little pentagon. So this was very cool. And as I'm saying, you know, when I discovered this one, this is the first one I saw that they said it was just non-uniform. But let's just see how cool something non-uniform can be. So this was huge for me because I built this and then I started working with the icosahedron stellation diagram, HSM Coxeter's and his colleagues' book, The 59 Icosahedra. And I was like, whoa, this is big time, because that whole stellation diagram, and I have a video on it called This Star is a Key to Understanding Sacred Geometry. Check that video out, really one of my favorites, because it's a 3D, flat 2D plane that I start to rotate around. It's the first video I ever did any 3D modeling stuff with in it. So I discovered through my drawings of this that I figured out how to draw the 60-pointed echidnahedron, the spiky little animal. This is the echidnahedron form in its geometric shape. And that this small pentagon face truncated icosahedron with these golden hexagon faces, all the vertices of the form, the red form, were given by the spiky little points, which means that this red form that I just showed you here, this one in my hand, actually contains that echidnahedron is inside this. All right. So this is my first revelation that there was a lot more to the non-uniform golden hexagon faced truncated icosahedrons. And it even got better in terms of the interesting things is that when you take a dodecahedron, just like this one here that I have, and each of these stars on here are cubes, right? This line here, there's 5 edges for the pentagram star on that pentagon face. Well, each one of those is a cube, really. So there's 5 cubes. We're going to return to this again. And, you know, when you make a 5-pointed star like this, it's got a little pentagon in the middle. Well, it turned out that that little pentagon that's in the middle there is this shape, is this form inside the dodecahedron. So here's the dodecahedron. Here is the golden hexagon truncated icosahedron that fits right in there. Let's pull that one off first. There's that. And there is my dodecahedron. There's my echidnahedron that's in there. And echidnahedron is in the dodecahedron, just like that. I mean, that was really mind-blowing. Okay, we're going to get back to the this guy here in a second, the Enneacontahedron, but I just want to point out a little bit more about the importance of these truncated icosahedron with golden hexagon faces. So here they are again. Okay, so this form is basically the pointy echidnahedron. 60 points of this give you the 60 vertices of this. And remember, this whole form is basically each of those pentagon faces are the 12 pentagon faces that are inside the dodecahedron. So there's a lot going on inside one little dodecahedron, right? And we're gonna, by the end of this video, it's gonna be mind-blowing how much is inside one dodecahedron. Okay, well, so far I've showed you 2 golden hexagon faced truncated icosahedron, but there is a uniform, you know, version of this with the regular hexagon face. And here it is. This is the regular hexagon face. This is carbon 60, Buckminster fullerene, the buckyball. It looks like a soccer ball. I mean, a little more rounded, of course, for the soccer ball. So this one is, you know, a naturally occurring element. So I really have a lot of huge questions about these golden hexagon faced ones. Where are these in nature? How are these showing up? So I want to put that open-ended invitation out to researchers of what's the relationship, because we know that the golden proportion is found in nature and many, many things, and so is the hexagon. And this is a real fusion form between pentagon and hexagon. They're working together. And as I'll show a little bit further on, how these are two golden hexagon ones are related to this. The key point, though, is that in drawing this, the golden hexagon faced versions of this, they match up the vertices. So these are the points where the edges meet one another, like that's a vertice right there. I'll show you how this was drawn in the next slide. But right now, these are just floating out in space. This whole form just looks like it's totally like, how is it connected to this? How did I even draw that? I'll show you in a moment how I did do that. But all the golden hexagon ones, they all meet at the circle intersections. And so that's because the golden circles draw golden hexagons very nicely. But this was the in-betweener, and this is how I was able to do this. I had to draw equilateral triangles, and based on scaling of the golden proportion circles that are associated around the outside here, making those equilateral triangles, and then where the crossing points are, where these lines of these golden triangles meet one another, that's where every vertice for this whole form showed up on. So it took me to go to the Enneacontahedron to work backwards to figure out how to draw this important carbon-60 form. Now, this is the Trinity Vision version of these, because I have all three of these forms layered over top of one another. And the golden hexagon blue one, the golden hexagon red one here and here, and then the black one is the equal edged hexagon, the regular hexagon. And you could see that the blue short edge and the red short edge, those are golden proportion versions to their hexagons that they're associated with. The black one has to fit right in the middle between those two, because it's really the equilibrium between a little bit phi proportion one direction and a little bit phi proportion the other direction. And there's not much, there's not a lot of wiggle room between those two. You know, I mean, that's the relationship between these forms. So I'm picturing in nature that this form, this buckyball, is more fluid, and there probably is some variation in edge length as it morphs around, or, you know, has some pliability to it, and that this little space between perfect equilibrium to a little bit out of equilibrium on either side is really like this sweet spot for nature, between not perfectly balanced, but a little bit to the left or the right, but not way to the extreme to the left or right, which is possible too, but this is some sort of sweet spot between these forms. So I thought that was cool, but let's break them out so you could see each of them together. So each of these are, here's the small pentagonal faced one, the equal edged length version, and here's the large pentagon faced one. And this one, like these two, because they're based on the golden proportion, like in their nesting of geometry, stellations, connection to the dodecahedron, connection to the icosahedron, building this out to make the stellated dodecahedrons, you know, the small and great, and seeing all that, it just works with the golden hexagon faces. You know, like these forms just show up naturally in the building process, very much like they just showed up in the rhombic enneacontahedron. This one is kind of not showing up like the other ones. So like I said, I had to go through this real long process to finally discover how to draw this by figuring out how the phi proportion was going to work out, but it's really dead on in the equilibrium space of like a perfect balance. And I really started to realize that the hexagon is this equilibrium version of perfection, where the pentagon is the disequilibrious perfection that's really sandwiched on either side of that, like back in this drawing here. And there was very much interesting to me that the lines of this, and in lines, the lines and circles have often been associated with a very masculine oriented version of sacred geometry, line drawings, compared to maybe a more feminine circle drawings. You know, this is just some language that's in sacred geometry. So I really found it interesting that the perfected version of this pentagon perfect version had so much to do with the lines, where the disequilibrious perfection, or the natural maybe perfection, of course, this is a natural form, it is carbon-60, had to do a lot more with these golden hexagon faces and finding their points on the circles rather than the lines. So that's just a little bit of contemplation. Don't put too much weight or value into that, but it's things that pop into my mind as I work with these forms. Now I drew this truncated icosahedron last fall because I was like, okay, I should figure out how to do this. And everything's supposed to be in the flower of life. So this must be in the flower of life. But how am I going to get golden ratio? How am I going to get these pentagon faces? Because I know I'm struggling with that in the flower of life. So this was super difficult to draw. I mean, I actually didn't like doing this drawing at all. I like doing this drawing because now I see how it fit. Like, this is great. This really works. I could see the relationship. But when I tried to put it in the flower of life, it was super frustrating because none of these points, even though they look like they're close to the edge of these circles, they're actually not on the edges of the circles at all. So I just said, well, I started by making the hexagon and just going around. I figured, well, that's the best hexagon to start with, and let's see if I could do it. But I had to use so many tricks in the book that I don't think I'd ever be able to draw it hand-drawn. Where this, I can draw hand-drawn. So there's something about the golden circles, which is based on the flower of life. We can put them in the flower of life, and those who are into the flower of life and Metatron's cube and all that stuff, next video I do is just going to be awesome. It's going to really show Metatron's cube in a relationship to all this golden ratio stuff, because it's all going to make sense. And it's really related to Trinity vision, which I'm calling this type of, where's my Trinity vision slide here? It's really related to this. We're going to revisit Metatron's cube to this perspective in just a little bit. And it's really, so check that out. Subscribe to the channel if you want to get up notice for that one. So anyway, here's the truncated icosahedron. Very difficult to draw. Pretty much I struggled to get it done, but I just wanted to show that that's what it would look like in here. And it's possible if someone wants to go for it, but this other method I showed seems to work a lot better. So, okay, that was a little foray out there. Hopefully that's helped you make sense of these truncated icosahedron versions, including the regular hexagon version. Let's get back to the rhombic enneacontahedron and look at it from the Pentagon view. So I've gone through the square view in the beginning. That gave me some information. The hexagon view gave me some more information. And now the Pentagon view is going to give me some information. And that's really how I work with a lot of the drawings from these different images. None of them hold the complete picture. Each one's going to provide a little segment of new way to look at this and have a whole other sets of questions. So ever thinking that like one view is the dominant view to look through is really kind of a one-sided perspective. And these three and other ones that emerge from that really give a much more unified view of the same elephant. So here it is, just double checking again, because I like to layer that over top. And this has got a sweet circular design, very, very simple to work. This view is just really made for the five-fold symmetry, of course, because it draws flat pentagons and stars, pentagrams and pentagons easily. So every line has significance and meaning in this, and it doesn't even take a lot of circles to draw. And we can do some cool reversals of this to see the front and the back of the form. And my lovely partner, Nancy Beneroff here, she, has been doing the apprenticeship for a little while, and she's just already amazing skilled geometer. You want to check out her work. Her and I did a new conversation, one of the earliest ones I did, The Heart of Sacred Geometry. Check that video out. She shows so much more of her amazing artwork there. And she took basically she took this, this drawing I did, very stale and straight lined and everything, and really added to life. And this is what I hope to inspire in the geometer community, not just look at this from a kind of scientific perspective or evolving sacred geometry, is really, how does this resonate with you? How much enjoyment do you get out? You feel a deeper sense of connection and relationship to these forms as they start to communicate and speak to you, and the discoveries you can make, and just turn it into a work of art that's unique to you, that you could decorate around your home with, and just brings great joy. So this is what Nancy and I are going to be doing. We've got an in-person sacred geometry workshop coming up in August 11th. And that's going to be hosted by the Biofield Tuning and Eileen Day McCusick. So I don't think it's up on our website yet, but it will be soon. So just I'm putting a little bit of information out there now, something to look forward to. And it will be my first live sacred geometry teaching because I've been working with apprentices online for a little over half a year. So check that one out. That's going to be in Northern Vermont. So, okay, now let's get back a little bit further with the Rhombic Enneacontahedron. And part of my question when I started working with this form, and I really was able to explore this through the Pentagon view, is what's at the core of this and what's the internal geometry of the form. So I had to draw the Enneacontahedron with many more golden circles to get it larger so I could scale in to the smaller and smaller forms that are in the inside. I got a whole model here in Zoom tools to my left, which you're going to have to see on the full screen. And I'll try to show more of what's happening internally. But at the heart of this, you know, it's impossible to stop in the infinite implosion that happens with working with these phi ratio forms, phi ratio nesting, like Dan Winter talks about, and that I shared some of those early drawings in the videos that I was working on, his models with the star child and the star mother video series that I have there. So down inside here in this blue is a little tiny icosiedodecahedron. And I decided to end it there. So the icosiedodecahedron is around here somewhere, but it's basically the inner vertices of it are made up of, sorry, I don't know if I could find it, just too many little pieces of paper around here folded up. So anyway, the icosiedodecahedron is made up of a compound of 5 octahedra. So basically that compound of 5 octahedra are inside the compound of 5 dodecahedron, because remember, the cube, inside this cube has a dual form, and the dual form is the octahedron, which has a vertice that touches each of these points. Now the octahedron is the 8-sided polyhedra here, this one here. So that's your octahedron. It's got 6 vertices. Just picture that a little bit smaller. I think I actually have one that fits in there. This one here, that's still not the right size, but this one goes in here and if we shrunk it down. So the dodecahedron has 5 of these. Well, if we rotate the dodecahedron around, rotate this cube around to get the dodecahedron, well, then we'll have 5 of these. And then that creates the icosiedodecahedron, these vertices. And that's way down in the heart of this. And off of that dodecahedron, then all of a sudden we could stellate that and get these small stellated dodecahedron from that. And we can continue to grow out from there and onto the great dodecahedron and the great stellated dodecahedron and onward and onward. So that's what this next slide is going to show. So from that little heart, I started to, let me just show you the model so at least you can see it. This is what we'll look at the end. So inside this, there's a lot of blue lines in geometry that I worked to figure out what was going on inside this. So we're gonna, and right in the heart there, you could see where those yellow globes are, right? That's a dodecahedron right in there. That's where I had to stop with the Zoom tools. But remember, that dodecahedron is those 5 cubes and those 5 octahedron, which are the icosiedodecahedron within that. So we're going to take a better look, but this what I'm holding in my hands right now is what you're looking at on my drawing right here. So the Rhombic Enneacontahedron is the outer shape, and the Rhombic Triacontahedron, which is going to become clear in a little bit, is also part of that. And then as we're going in, all these blue lines, this blue pentagon that I'm tracing around right now, that is an icosahedron. Icosahedron, 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 that is basically 12 icosahedron that are around this, because there's one right on top facing us and one behind it. So we've got the icosahedron in there. We've got the icosiedodecahedron down in there. We've got a dodecahedron that they make and that one is right in around here. I know it's hard to see all this stuff. We've got a great stellated dodecahedron. That's this big blue pentagon star that's going around here. We got the small stellated dodecahedron, which is all the black lines in there, which is also overlapping with that great dodecahedron. And then all that just implies that this thing is riddled with cubes and octahedrons and tetrahedrons and all these other forms that are going on in there. I mean, there's so much geometry in here because we could do this same thing at any single one of these points. So where do you stop? Where do you go? But by looking at this, you're developing eyes to see the complex geometry that's in there. It's more than just a 2D flat plane of lines, really. You know, this wild assortment of lines contains so much information in it because it is a building template, and we can use this view just as much as we use the square view or the hexagonal view. So when we say the flower of life is the one that is like the building block, the universal template of creation, well, it's one perspective of that, which contains the same information as this template of creation that contains everything, which is the same one as a square view one. So really all of those are the same. So we really can't say one or the other is the best. Each one, like I said, does provide information. But you know, as I build the Enneacontahedron, this is where I got started with it. Here's my little template on the side there for making this. So, you know, you got to start looking for phi in all the right places. So you start making these connections within, right? Start looking within, start finding phi in the right places. You start to see how those connect what's inside the form. So I noticed right away, you know, this is the same view, even though there looks like a lot going on here. It's really just these two sheets from a side view of the two stars over top of one another that are making this awesome looking pattern. And that really gave me the insight of how the icosahedron is going to be built into this, how the small stellated dodecahedron is going to be in here, how the great stellated one, this little cap that's coming up right here, that's going to be part of the central icosahedron. The little yellow balls right here, I don't know if you can see those, they're right there and there. Those are a pentagon face that are part of going to be the core heart of this, which is that dodecahedron, which is really essentially this right here. And inside that is that icosiedodecahedron. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, just started to make the connections, because, you know, if you start to know how phi works in terms of its relationships with one another, all the connections will start to come together. So this is the structure all built out. You know, I got all the internal geometry just like it is to my left here on the floor. And then, you know, it looks like a lot's going on in there, which is true. There is a lot of lines and connecting lines. But then what I saw is that, well, this is going to expand out now. And what it does is it starts to create these decagon hoops based on that internal geometry. I started to follow the star point outside of the Enneacontahedron. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a dodecahedron in here that each of these decagon hoops are sharing an edge of. And if I do that all the way around, of course, I ran out of Zoom tools, and this thing was going to be 5 feet in 5 feet in circumference in just a little bit. So I started to build this out, but I was like, okay, we'll leave it at that because I can draw it. So it gave me enough information to show how there's going to be a cluster, and inside the dotted lines are the Rhombic Enneacontahedron, and these dotted lines are the dodecahedron down in here. And then these edges are swooping in, creating the decagon hoops that I just showed in the previous picture, but they're all interlocked and interconnected with one another. And remember, each of these icosiedodecahedron, that's this, it's got triangles and pentagon faces, right? That each one of those, remember, is that blue form at the very heart of this whole structure, the Enneacontahedron. So I can't even really begin to contemplate what would happen if you took each of these icosiedodecahedron and turned that into a Rhombic Enneacontahedron around that. You know, it's just because right at this little center spot was a tiny little icosiedodecahedron. Well, here's now 12 big ones. So really, this is a 12 around one scenario. And the one here is that each of these 12 icosiedodecahedron are around the central dodecahedron. And it's just so elegant the way the dodecahedron edges. So I mean, these edges, what you do is you start to build a decagon, 10-sided polygon, right? 10 deca, and off that pentagon, and you do that all the way around, and they just start looping around. But you do it in all these different planes, and you end up with this awesome compound, of icosiedodecahedron, which will cluster and clump together in many, many, many unique ways, and continue to grow on infinitely like that. Okay, so you see, I'm really diving deep into this. I mean, I really unpack so much information around this, and we've got a few more little bits of discovery. This was new to me, but just yesterday I was looking through the little Zone 2 primer, and they have one very not so great picture of the same thing that I'm going to show here in this black and white image that I read yesterday, and was like, oh, well, I guess they did know that, which I assume they did because it wasn't that huge of a deal. But it was really exciting to me because this rhombic, remember, the rhombic tricontahedron is a compound of the dodecahedron and the icosahedron. And of course, they got to be more comparable in size, but these two edges will cross, and then that will create our 30-faced form. All right, so the 34-face form comes from this. I got some slides in a minute. They're going to show that better. But on this rhombic face, I'm going to hold it just like it is in the drawing there. You're looking at it like that, right? So it makes a hexagon pretty much outside of it, and you got 3 rhombic faces that are like that. Well, the blue is the Enneacontahedron. That little diamond face, the small one, the skinny diamond face right there, is going to go inside that face on all 30 of these faces. And those are the 30 narrow faces that are on the 30 large rhombic tricontahedron faces. So there was a fusion and integration between the tricontahedron and the Enneacontahedron. Because when I first started working this, I was like, well, if you've got a 30-sided face form, the tricontahedron, well, I'm assuming the 90 one is going to contain that, like it just gets bigger like that. But it's almost like so many times I build the forms, it's like, oh, we're back to the tricontahedron again. Oh, we're back to the tricontahedron again, over and over again. It's like you keep coming back to this. So that Enneacontahedron is in there. So only the narrow faces are on there, and my dotted lines in here are showing that the other rhombic faces, the wide ones, the 60 of those, are down underneath the tricontahedron that is now going to be the prominent flat face that we see, with another diamond on top of that. So basically the 90 is in the 30 here. And this is just drawing the faces themselves, and we can easily do that in the golden circle square view template. We just have to draw phi ratio circles until we get down to this little one. And this is all easy to do hand drawn. I don't just have the computer do it for me. I use the compass like I would on paper to take the appropriate size proportions, which are based off of these, to make these circles. And then I can draw the red one, which is the rhombic tricontahedron, which is this one, the larger diamond red one of the 30-face form. And then I can make the narrow one right in there based on the smaller one, because everything contains that phi proportion scaling between all these. And of course, this rhombic face, when I draw a line this way and this way, horizontally and vertically, those two are the edges of the dodeca and icosa compound. Remember, where these two edges cross, that's going to give us the rhombic diamond face of the tricontahedron. All right, so let's take a look at the where this is all kind of going. Well, because of those little discoveries there, this whole thing can be found, this whole tricontahedron and the Enneacontahedron, this big form. Well, we could basically just put it in a cube. One cube can contain this whole thing. We just pop it right in a box, and we're back in the box again. We're just going to put it back into one cube, and this black square is representative of the cube. So it just fits right on there. The edges are all, set, fitting inside there, and Then we're down, here's the tricontahedron, the red, and we could see the diamond faces are the narrow diamond faces, the black ones here are inside the red ones at all these different variety of angles, right? So here and here, there it is, there it is. So just study these drawings if you want to really see what's going on there, but we could take that off and then we're back to the Enneacontahedron. It was in the tricontahedron the whole time and it was in a cube. Okay, so everything's back to this one cube, but is it just one cube, right? No, it's not just one cube because we'll get to that in a second, but here it is again. This is now in the hexagon view. So basically I took the hexagon view and I added the cube around the hexagon to show that the darker faces, the red and the blue, they are inside the cube, this blue edged cube. I should have done that black, but we got the blue edges of the cube. We only see two faces in this perspective because just picture you're looking at the cube like that, right? You got a flat face up here, flat face, and you got two on the back that you don't see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's just off centered a little bit or off the edge a little bit. And then we've got one rhombic face, narrow rhombic face, one rhombic face, narrow rhombic face. And we got all these other rhombic faces in here that we don't know are in there. But the thinner lines are back inside, and then we'll have a face that touches up here. Remember, this has got 30 faces. So that's only 6 faces taken care of. 5 times 6 is 30. So we need 4 other cubes. Well, this is simply taken care of because back over here, this is what a dodecahedron is. The dodecahedron contains 5 cubes. It's a compound of 5 cubes. So that one cube is not really gonna contain, I mean, it does, we could say it contains the tricontahedron and the enneacontahedron, but really it's only accountable for 6 of 30 faces. And we need the other faces if we want those to be in contact with the cube, because any one of these faces can be in contact with 6 cubes, or any 6 of these faces can be contact with the cube. Then we have 5 more cubes to put together. And what I've shown here in this diagram is this kind of like an exploded view of the 5 cubes that are in the dodecahedron. And, you know, we've got these, which we're used to, that are really from the hexagonal perspective. As I've said in a lot of my videos, because we put the dodecahedron as the orientation that we're looking at it, rather than turning it, we can draw it that way too. That means that either the cube, because these are nested and holding each other's vertices, I mean, they're in contact, we can either draw the dodecahedron tilted and the cube will be vertically oriented, you know, along the vertical axis this way. Or we can keep the dodecahedron that way and then all the cubes kind of orient to that. So this cube and this cube are, you could see where the lines are going to be part of these. This one's easy to see. There's this square. This comes down to here. The bottom edge of that is back on the back side of the dodecahedron. But the main point I'm trying to say is I didn't have to rotate the enneacontahedron, rhombic dodecahedron compound for any of these. See, it's the cubes that are moving around this. This is the same orientation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's all come together. And the 6, same image on each of these that are just layered over top of this. And really, this cube is kind of doing a little dance, you know, around this form. As this stays stationary, this one's going like this, this, you know, that's what's happening there. So here's a close-up of that same rhombic tricontahedron in the dodecahedron. So it really just comes down to, like, it's not really like this is some way out there complex structure that's going to contain everything else in it, although it does, because even inside this, at the heart of it, is a dodecahedron. So it's, like I said, it's infinite. We don't know where to stop or start. But if we were to say this isn't like, it's not like this is some culminating form, because I'm always looking like, what's the culminating form? How's it all gonna, and what's gonna end up as, or what's gonna end up at the smallest point as? I can't really say, because it's not like just because this has more faces, it's like, it's like all the platonic solids are in here, which is true, but also just the most simple ether, the ether contains it, the dodecahedron contains this form, just as they shown. So that was really neat. The last thing I want to end on is just a little contemplation of the compounds that I've been sharing in a lot of my videos. I don't know if it's a piece to the puzzle, but I thought it was interesting because who doesn't love the mystery of the 369 and the mathematics associated with the number 9? So, as I was looking at this, when we take our two platonic solids, the icosahedron on the right, the blue one, and the red dodecahedron, remember, those two compound together. And you're just going to have to visualize the blue edge would be on that rhombic face, and this red edge would be right there. So that's what this is giving the vertices of this. And this is a 30-sided form. It gives us 30. Now, the deltoidal hexacontahedron this is another phi-based version of this, because there is a deltoidal hexacontahedron out there that is based on other parameters probably. But the way I came up with the one which I built over here, and I showed this one in the icosa connection video, is the red and blue lines crisscross again. And instead of making a rhombic face, because what I'm doing is I'm taking the icosiedodecahedron. This is the first time I was able to show that in this video by itself, but the triangles and the pentagons of this form. And these two are dual forms. So this is important to say, red and blue are dual forms within all this. And the compound of dual forms and that means where their edges are crossing, they are going to, when they compound, the edges cross like that, they're going to make a own unique form. So this is the red and the blue here are crisscrossing here and here. Red is going this way, blue is going there, and then we get the deltoid, like shoulder blade, scapula, deltoidal shape. So that's going to be a compound of those two and give us a 60-sided. So we got 3, 6, and now we're up to the rhombic enneacontahedron. That's 90-sided. Now you notice this goes from here to here, and this goes from 60, but this is also 60, this form down here. For some reason, I don't know, it doesn't use the same form. I'm not sure what the compound of this is, because this has a compound. I'll have to discover that compound form, because I think I started working on it, but it got complex. So the rhombic enneacontahedron, the 90, so that's the 9, the 3, 6, 9, and this one has 2 compound forms. So I don't know if that means anything. It was just interesting to me that we came up with these kind of progression. But like I said, it all circles back to this rhombic tricontahedron, because all this stuff is pretty much somewhat related to this compound of the icosa and dodecahedron. And remember, that is in relationship to all the platonic solids that are represented in one dodecahedron, except for the icosahedron. So you got to compound it. So really, everything is contained, and all the truncations and all the stuff we'd ever want to do is found within this right here. Probably this rhombic tricontahedron would be the one in conjunction with the icosiedodecahedron. So let's stop the share. I hope you really enjoyed all the slides and all the descriptions that I provided there for you. Let's show you a few more of the forms. I don't think I need to discuss them too much. I didn't make a regular hexagon version of these, but these were the two that were the compounds that I was just showing you at the end that will create the enneacontahedron. Now, the Pentagon form of this is different than the one you'd find on Wikipedia, but it's following the relationship to this form, and this too. So the other one of these is made on the regular truncated icosahedron, and then I don't know what you get here, So they probably won't compound and make the same thing, or they'll make something different with different rhombic faces, but the phi proportion might not be maintained as much as it is. This is the deltoidal hexacontahedron. So these are those deltoid shapes. Crisscross of the lines and the different views. So I did a whole video on that one, icosa connection. And I don't know, deltoids, I don't know, was that scapula? I don't know, I'm getting confused my anatomy at this point. Just thinking about that in the back of my head. I know there's some, probably body workers out there that are going to correct me on that. So here is the big form that I was describing, and let's see if we can do a good job of sharing a little bit more about this. So let's look at it from the square view. There's the big rhombic face, the diamond-shaped face on the front, and there's the wider one. So remember, there's 30 of these, 60 of these. Here's from the pentagonal perspective, and that one actually kind of helps because then we can kind of look down in there. So this blue edge pentagon, it's just the next one you see there. That's the edges of the dodecahedron that are in there. And as we go in there, it stellates with the great stellate, and now it's down in, you see there's an icosahedron down in there that I'm pointing out, wiggling my two fingers towards. The blue or purplish colored ones, balls, those are forming an icosahedron, but there's a small stellated dodecahedron that's down in there that's connected to those yellow zone balls. And that actually makes just a great dodecahedron. So these are all part of the Kepler-Poinsot star polyhedra. So I did a whole video on drawing those. Check that one out. And it's really important to know those forms because they're going to show up in all this geometry of expansion and compression based on phi ratio infinite scaling. So the yellow down in there is where I ended up, and that's the pentagonal face of the 12 pentagons of the dodecahedron. And at that point, I couldn't go any smaller. But those are the stellations. And now the icosahedron pretty much ends. Let's flip the form over this way, because now I'm going to show the other side of it, which, remember, now we could really clearly see that I've added in the golden hexagon blue face. And if I extend the golden hexagon blue face, I'm making an icosahedron, 20-sided platonic solid with equilateral triangles. And then the red lines, struts, those are the rhombic triacontahedron there too, right? So remember, those have the big rhombic faces, and then the yellow is right here, and that's back to the Enneacontahedron. So I did one view of our, there it is, it's the best view. You can kind of see these long, there's a big pentagon that's coming around the whole thing. That's an icosahedron. The red is the triacontahedron. The dodecahedron's in here, and that's pretty much the Enneacontahedron. Yellow is flat to those faces. So let's look at that. So you can see the flat red and yellow there, and that's one image. That's the one I just drew with the red and the yellow that was just by itself in there without the rest of the geometry. And then there's a bunch of icosahedron, little ones, 12 little ones that are around this that are connected to these vertices. So you've got the 12 around one, and then I can't add the icosiedodecahedron here because I don't have enough space. It'd be a huge model. So anyway, that is the complete analysis at this point of my relationship. And with the Enneacontahedron, it's been quite a journey. That's been, you know, a couple of weeks of work, really deep diving into that, all stimulated from that dream and from this book that I got about a year ago, and seeing the picture in there of all the cool stuff that can be done with geodesics and the rest of the descriptions in this book with early Zoom tools. But it's been quite a journey since seeing the picture, and I'm really thankful that I was able to share all that information. Hopefully there's some little nuggets or little things to follow up that you're interested in there. And if you enjoyed the video, like I said, next time I'm going to be getting back into Metatron's cube and working with the regular platonic solids and how they all nest and in Metatron's cube. And then we're going to, you know, just keep working on new things from there, KNEW things from there. So subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video. Check out my Patreon, because part of really relating to sacred geometry is starting to learn to draw it. So you really start to develop your own unique relationship with it, learning, you know, coloring it in, being creative, artistic, getting into drawing some more difficult, challenging forms if you're into that sort of thing, whatever your interests are. So I've got a Patreon set up that can get you doing that, and also offer some apprenticeships as well to work on with people either one-on-one or in small groups. So yeah, I'm just really thankful to share all that information with you. Much love and have a great rest of your day. Peace.